My name is Lance Rosen, and I came to Antioch in '63, intending to be a poli-sci major, along with my assigned roommate, Michael Griggs. We wound through several majors and ended up being drama majors, and we are still friends, and have been friends for life, along with Tom Curtis, who didn't become a drama major, but is still a dear friend. And Michael couldn't be here today. He was in Portland, I live in Seattle. Mike couldn't be here, but he did prepare something that he asked me to read for him, and I will do that in a moment. I want to say that of all the adults that have influenced me in my youth and 20s, none other than my own parents informed my life, to use Louise's phrase, as much as Dow. I've had a wonderful life with great joys and great sorrows, as all of us have, but it's been a wonderful life, and I most attribute my experiences and my viewpoint on life, as well as the work I chose to do, through the influence of Dow. Paul was a very close second. I love Dow. I loved Paul, and I'm so glad to be here at this event. And this is what Michael wrote, and I'll do my best to get through it. It'll take a few minutes, so please bear with me. And Mike just got this done a couple of days ago. Sometime after I arrived at Antioch, I heard about Arthur Morgan's theory and practice for recruiting faculty members. As I understood it at the time, Morgan recruited faculty members who were not just knowledgeable in their field or discipline or scholars, but above all, who were inspirational teachers, mentors, and role models for the students, not just as academics, but as human beings whose values and integrity were exemplary. Dow was just such a faculty member and just such a man. I have many vivid memories of Dow during my years at Antioch. In the mid-'60s, and I think it was '65, Tony, right? That he went on sabbatical leave. '66. And he and Willa spent a good part of that leave living in Japan with friends who they knew through their mutual peace activism. And when they returned to campus, the students and faculty were invited to an informal session where Dow was to report to us on his sabbatical, particularly the time he spent in Japan. Both Michael and I remember it vividly. We gathered in a rehearsal room in the Antioch area theater and sat in chairs that were arranged in a circle. And Dow told us how he wanted us to learn about No theater, that's N-O-H, No theater, a classical Japanese theater form. But he had not arranged a typical academic sabbatical with visits to archives and libraries and prearranged meetings with scholars and practitioners. He simply went to see No performances day after day. He did not speak to anyone at the theater about access to the performance or seek to meet with the theater directors or with management. He just dedicated himself to immersing himself in live No theater performances. Now, No theater is a classical form of drama that is beautiful in form, and it unfolds in a slow, precisely staged dance drama. Before coming to Antioch, I'd seen some film footage of No theater, and I joked to my high school buddies, they don't call it No theater for nothing. But my perspective changed, as did Dow's. It was performed in a trance-like ritual performed by masked actors accompanied by sparse but powerful music. The Japanese language is spoken, chanted, and sung by the performers in an archaic and stylized form, and it's not fully understood even by modern Japanese audiences. You can often see audience members following the action on stage and then following the words in the programs or in the actual text of the work. The greatest pleasure of the audience is to see the plays from a familiar, centuries-old canon performed with precision and mastery by actors who have studied and trained for years so that they can evoke delicate and passionate feelings with the most nuanced gesture of a fan or quaver in their voice. And in the '60s, when Dow was there, performances still lasted an entire day. It was not 2 hours at the theater. And Dow told us he went to the theater day after day trying to understand it. He was troubled, he said, because no matter how hard he tried, he could not stay awake for an entire performance. And he would repeatedly doze off during the performances. what was wrong with him, he wondered, that he was witnessing one of the most beautiful and exquisite forms of classical theater, and he kept falling asleep. Then, one day, he told us, he caught himself, just as he was about to nod off, and found himself in that half-asleep, half-awake state, that intermediate state like we experience when waking up in stages from a dream-filled sleep. And he began to experience the play being performed on stage as a kind of trance-like waking dream. And then he realized that that was how the No was meant to be experienced by its audience. And one day, Dal told us, some of the actors began to wonder who was this strange Gaijin, a Westerner, who attended their performances every day, spoke to no one, but he never seemed to talk to anyone at the theater. They didn't know what was going on, so one day, one of the performers invited him to come backstage. When they found out who he was backstage and what he did and why he was there, they opened their world to him and gave him an intimate look into a world that very few Westerners, even today, but certainly even most Japanese, were ever granted. It was the beginning, he said, of a great education and many new friendships. Over the next days, the actors taught him about their training, how they prepared for the performances. They showed him the construction of the stage and its meaning, and showed him the different masks for different types of characters and how the masks were used. And when it came time for him to leave Japan, they gave him a present. At this point in his talk, Dal paused. He leaned forward and removed a cloth-covered object from a wooden box in front of him. He removed the cloth slowly, revealing a beautiful hand-carved wooden mask. He told us about how the masks were made by master carvers and that this one was hundreds of years old. He explained that he couldn't really explain to us how powerful these masks became when used by the No actors, how their bodies became one with the masks and the characters they were portraying. He told us he just wanted us to see how the mask looked on an actor's face. And I remember when he did that, I, at least, and I think many of us in the room, got terrified and asked us to put it on. But he mumbled with humility how he couldn't even approximate the effect of the mask on a skilled No actor as he slipped the mask over his own head and began slowly changing the angle of his head and his face in short, very simple series of poses. I stopped breathing. The mask seemed part of him. He wasn't doing anything, but his body underwent a transformation and his whole being seemed possessed by the otherworldly spirit of that mask. After a few moments, he removed the mask, and there was Dal again, soft-spoken and modest. And when I read these words from Michael, I was reminded of one of the wonderful plays that Dal was in, and that I just good luck to be in as well, and that was the wonderful production of J.B. in the amphitheater, which he used many of these techniques with the masks that he had learned in Japan. Going back to Michael's words, for me, this was a defining moment in my life, although I probably didn't realize it at the time. I was told a fascinating story by a master storyteller while being engaged and entertained. I was taught an enormous amount about a form of theater I knew absolutely nothing about at the time, and also about the nature of theater itself. That day, Dal modeled a man whose artistry I would from that day forward admire, learn from, and try to emulate. And in the story itself, Dal modeled the values of peace, humility, perseverance, and respect for other cultural values and social and political activism. As I reflect on it today, that day was the beginning of my own lifelong artistic fascination and career involvement with Japanese theater and culture, with the give and take, the relationship between the audience and the live performer, and with masks, all of which continues to this day. I was fortunate enough to study with him for several more years, to have him as a friend, a director, a counselor, and a mentor for the rest of my years at Antioch and beyond. I saw him a few times after I left Antioch, and more than 20 years later, after I graduated, invited him and Willa to Santa Cruz, where I was director of the Barry Public Theater. Michael formed that theater with me, Terry Baum from the class of '69, and Michael Patterson from the class of '68. He and Willa spent the summer, and Dal directed The Time of Your Life. And we had the time of our lives in that summer. I was so proud and happy that I could share my teacher, my good friend, with all of my friends at the Barry Public Theater. I was still learning from him. I think I only saw him once more after that when I attended an Antioch reunion several years ago. I regret that I didn't stay in touch, but he is always with me and I love him dearly. I would have loved to be in Yellow Springs with all of you today. There are so many other Dal stories to tell and memories to share. I share one with my dearest friend and Antioch roommate, Lance Rosen. Ask him and maybe he will share it with you. I'll do that some other time because this is going on and there are other people with stories. I cannot be with you today because I have responsibilities at a weekend performance of Portland Taiko. Taiko is the Japanese word for drum, where I am currently the executive director. It's a fascinating Japanese drum performance art, and Michael Griggs is the executive director of the Japanese company. I told you how that day in the rehearsal studio influenced my career. When I was at Antioch, my friends and I used to muse about that infamous, I would call it infamous, I would say something else, but that infamous inscription on Horace Mann's statue, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some great victory for humanity." I always thought it was a little humorous. It seemed so grandiloquent, almost pompous, or at least implausible to achieve for most of us. Yet in my heart of hearts, I think I have always been proud to have received an education at a college with a combination of foolhardiness, idealism, and sheer chutzpah, a word I taught him, to brazenly announce that as its enduring legacy. I want to say to Dal and to his family, friends, and all whom he loved back then, all whom he loved back, that we are his victories for humanity. Dal's victories may or may not live on in journalism or in the history books, but they live on in all of us whose life he touched. Goodbye, my friend, my teacher, from one of your many victories. Thank you.